Good morning, Ondandal. I am Priyadashni from Department of Electronics and Instrumentation. Today we are going to look on to the topic radioactive waste management. So first, what is waste management? So waste is nothing but a thing that we left once we use the thing properly. So waste management, it helps us to properly dispose these wastes into final stage of disposal so that it won't affect humans and environment. So it helps us to process, transport and collect these wastes to final stage of disposal. So these waste management helps us to reduce the adverse effect on the humans and health issues and environmental aspects. So these wastes may either be solid, liquid, gases or biomedical, municipal wastes. So whatever may be these kinds of wastes, we need to dispose it properly so that it won't affect any humans and environment. So now what is a nuclear waste? Nuclear waste is a material that contains radioactive chemicals. So anything that we use in the lab like radioactive materials that contains uranium, plutonium or these types of radioactive materials that we use inside the lab. Once after completing those lab experiments, we left those things without proper disposal. So these things emits rays like alpha, beta and gamma rays. So these are considered as nuclear wastes. And the final product that comes out with these radioactive material is noted as radioactive waste. So these radioactive waste, it decays over a particular time period. So once if it is properly isolated and is confined in a proper disposal. But if it is not properly disposed, so it affects the surrounding environment. So other type of radioactive waste is that we need to store it in a proper manner and we need to keep it in a safe place so that it may decay over a prolonged period and it may take even up to millions of years. Now we look on to what is half-life. Half-life is used to describe a quantity that is undergoing exponential decay. Now we consider the uranium-238 is a material that is going to use in a lab experiment. So uranium-235, its half-life is about 4.5 billion years. So this uranium-238, it takes 4.5 billion years in order to decay as 50% of its toxicity. Likewise, uranium-235, it takes about 700 million years to decay its toxicity. That too, it's 50% of it toxic. And uranium-234, it takes 25,000 years in order to decay its 50% of its toxic level. So this half-life period, it describes how much time material is taken to decay its toxicity level. So now we look on to the radioactive waste. It is classified into types, that is dependent upon the content or the percentage of radioactivity that is present inside the metal. So based upon the content present inside that metal, it is classified into three types. One is low level waste, second one is the intermediate level waste and third one is the high level waste. So we look on to low level waste. It contains only 1% of radioactive content, but it occupies of 90% of the radioactive wastes. When we look on to the intermediate level waste, its radioactive content is 4% only and it occupies 7% of total amount of waste. High level wastage, it contains 3% of its volume over 100%, but its radioactive content is very high when compared to other two wastes. And it occupies 95% of radioactive content. So now we look on to the three types of wastes and how these wastes are produced. So first one is the low level waste. It is generated mainly from the hospitals, industries as well as in the nuclear fuel cycle. And what are all these wastes means? It includes a paper, rags, tools, clothings and filters that are used in the hospitals and the industries. Even these papers, tools and the clothings that are used in the hospitals and the industries, it contains some amount of radioactivity. So those wastages that are to be disposed properly, even though it contains low amount of radioactive content. So it should be properly shielded during handling, and it should be disposed in a very safe manner so that it won't affect any human beings and environments. The second one is the intermediate level waste. Intermediate level waste, it contains a little bit higher amount of radioactivity. As we have discussed, it contains 7% of radioactivity. Some of these kinds of wastes, it requires shielding, so that we need to shield it properly. So what are all these types of metals? Or it contains resins, chemical sludges, metal fluids, cladding and contain materials from the reactors. So these types of wastes comes from the nuclear reactors, from the minings or from the medical wastes that we need to shield it properly and we need to dump it underground. The third one is the high level waste. High level waste, it usually arises from the usage of uranium fuels in the nuclear reactors and in terms of nuclear weapons also. So these types of waste, it contains a high radioactivity and it is very hot in nature. Or we can say it is a ash that is coming out when once we burn uranium. So it is also considered as a high level waste. Because of it contains a high radioactivity, we need to handle it properly. So that we need to take it to a remote place in order to protect it from the workers. So till now we have discussed about the types of radioactive wastes dependent upon the content of radioactive material. Now we look on to the disposal method of how we will dispose this radioactive waste. First method is the above ground disposal. Second method is geological disposal. Third one is a deep borewell disposal, and fourth one is ocean disposal. So now above ground disposal. So the name itself, it gives that we can dispose these radioactive wastes in the ground level itself, above ground level itself. So generally it is used for intermediate and the low level wastes. So how we will dispose these kinds of wastes is wastes that is collected from the spent fuel. It is sealed in addition to the inert gases and it is kept inside the steel cylinder. So this steel cylinder, it is placed inside a concrete cylinder so that it acts as a radiation shield. So that concrete cylinder, it acts as a shield so that the radiation, it won't come outside of that steel cylinder. This method is very cheap and it is economical friendly, so that it is relatively used so that we can easily construct and it is monitored all over the places. And this image shows how those fuels that is used, that are taken and it is arranged inside a steel cylinder. And once these steel cylinder are collected and that is placed inside the concrete cylinder, and all these concrete cylinders are collected and these are placed in a remote place but above the ground itself. No need to bury it inside. We can keep all these concrete cylinders over the ground itself. This concrete cylinder, it acts as a shield so that radiation, it won't come outside. The second method is the deep borewell disposal. So this type of disposal, it is extremely used for high level radioactive wastes, which normally comes out from the nuclear reactor, or we can extremely use it for intermediate level wastes also. So placing these waste as much as 5 km beneath the surface of the earth. So how these borewell disposal is made is, all these wastes are collected and it is sealed in a steel containers, and we need to dig a borewell of around 5 kilometers beneath the sea level, and after that all these wastes are sealed and it is placed inside a clay cement, and after that a crushed rock and the backfill is placed Once after that, all these setups need to fill inside the deep borewell of around 5 kilometer. So this image shows that how the wastes are collected. So the wastes are collected in a container and it is sealed with the help of the concrete cement, and once after this method it is kept inside a deep well, and its height is about 5 kilometer. So this is how we can displace high level radioactive wastes. Third one is the ocean disposal of radioactive waste. So these types of radioactive wastes, whether liquids or gases, that are handled in various containers as well as in the reactor vessel. So that is whether used or not used. So all are collected in a shield and it needs to be placed in the form of rectangle. You can see in the figure. So once after this placement, we can place all these fuels in the stainless steel container. So once after the stainless steel container, the upper part and the bottom part are concreted, and once after those, these setup is submerged inside the ocean so that it won't affect the human beings or the workers that they are working there. The fourth one is the island disposal. So it involves placing these radioactive wastes very deep inside the geological formations. So the wastes that are collected, it is transported to the islands. So here the oceans, it act as the natural barriers. So when compared to other types like ocean disposal or deep well bore well, this island disposal is, its cost is twice, since we need to transport all these wastes to the islands and it costs much, but it acts a very good method, since the ocean, it acts as a natural barrier, so it won't affect that much. The fifth one is the ice sheet disposal. Here all the wastes are collected into a continental ice masses in the isolated area. It involves the placing of wastes into the ice and it is kept inside a shallow deep well that is placed down in a ice sheet. Here these cooling, it acts as a natural barrier. So now prolonged exposure of these radioactive wastes, it causes cancers and deformity in the bones, leukemia, anemia, and it also makes mutations in the DNAs and it can produce abnormal reproduction, not only in the humans but also in the plants also. It causes adverse effect. So it may kill some of the trees and the plants, and somehow it can reduce or it may result in permanent loss of several plant species. So that we should not expose these radioactive substances to the humans and to the environment also for a prolonged period. So that we need to dispose it in a proper manner. But disposal of this radioactive waste is not a complex issue. It involves numerous physical and political factors involved in these processes. So these stuff, it should decay until it takes a half-life period. Once after the half-life period only, some amount of radioactive waste is decayed. And now, not only it contains disadvantages, but short usage of these radioactive wastes, it can cure some amount of cancers, and we can use it in terms of medical terms, so that it can able to visualize the thyroid that is present inside the humans, and we can use it for the treatment of malfunctions and the mutations. So this is how we need to handle the radioactive wastes that is present over the environment. So waste management, it is necessary in order to build a sustainable and a livable environment. It also helps us to reduce the adverse effect on the humans and the environment. So this is how the radioactive wastes they are classified, and it is disposal methods are seen, and we have seen it some of its advantages and disadvantages. So this is up for today's session, and we will continue in the next class. And thank you.